Back now on the show to continue recapping some of the games that we saw over the past weekend. Talking about now another AFC North team, talking recently just about the Steelers and their win. The Cleveland Browns weren't as fortunate this past weekend. The Giants with an impressive win in Cleveland, 21-15 behind their standout defensive performance, right? They won the game with Daniel Jones playing a pretty solid game. Malik Neighbors impressed as well, but overall, my trophy goes to their defense, right? Because they were all over Deshaun Watson. It was a pretty heavily defensive game as well. There was only three touchdowns in the first half and one in the fourth quarter, and that was pretty much it. It felt like the score was 21-15 for the longest time. There wasn't that much action in the second half overall when both defense kind of, anchored down and started really focusing in on taking some stuff away. The game kind of stalled out a little bit, but credit to the Giants and their defense for holding on to that lead. But you look at this now for the Cleveland Browns overall. It's 2 home games and 2 losses for the Browns. The only win that they got was on the road in Jacksonville, and that one was another ugly game, another defensive-heavy game. Both offenses not really doing that much to win some of these games. You know what the Browns kind of remind me of a little bit? And I was thinking about this just now, actually. It came into my mind with some of these low-scoring defensive games where you just do enough to get by. It reminds me so much of just the Steelers last year with Kenny, and then when he gets hurt, Mitch Trubisky, just doing enough here and there to kind of get by, and you win games predominantly with your defense is the kind of vibe I'm getting with Cleveland, right? And it's crazy to say that I'm even thinking about comparing Deshaun to Kenny Pickett, who's a backup now, Mason Rudolph, who again is a backup right now, Mitch Trubisky, another backup right now. The Steelers had 3 backup quarterbacks on their roster last year, and they still managed to get into the playoffs. So can the Browns do the same thing? I guess we've seen it's possible, but I'm just getting that same sort of vibe right now from them. Very low-scoring games, doing or having a play or two on offense where you capitalize on and then you hold on to that lead for dear life. And more often than not, you do enough just to get by. But the Browns have a tough schedule this year. They have, if I'm not mistaken, the hardest schedule in the NFL this year. So whereas the Steelers last year, they weren't necessarily dealing with the toughest of opponents throughout the entire year, I think the Browns have a rough going at it this year. So that could be a factor in all of this. But looking at the game a little bit more in its totality between these two sides, right? You look at Daniel Jones, I mentioned before, he finished 24 of 34 for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 2 sacks taken as well, so that's a credit to their offensive line for holding guys like Garrett and Zadarius Smith pretty comfortably to only allow 2 sacks. Then you look at Devin Singletary, 16 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. That was the Giants ran the ball 32 times in this game, so not only did they have a solid pass protection, but also the run blocking was very good, evidently, because running the ball that many times and being pretty productive overall is a good sight to see, right? Because the Giants have been dealing with this offensive line, the deficiencies on it for the longest time, it seems, and they didn't have that many problems this past Sunday, so that's a win for them. And on the other side, the Browns are dealing with a lot of injuries on their offensive line, and they gave up 8 sacks to the New York Giants defense, only 2 sacks, like I mentioned before, in comparison to Cleveland's, and it stifled a lot of what the Browns were doing, right? Because Deshaun Watson finished 21 of 37, 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amari Cooper had a solid game, 86 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. But the turnover battle was a big point in this game. Cleveland lost that battle with 2 fumbles lost by Deshaun Watson. So another praise for the Giants defense, but still more disappointing actions, I think, for the Browns. And you look at how this game kind of played out. Cleveland jumped out to that early lead. The Giants fumbled the opening kickoff, and Watson threw that touchdown on the first play to Amari Cooper. So you're thinking, like, the Browns, fast start, good defense. This could be a very good afternoon for the Cleveland Browns, right? But the good defense back and forth from the start, had the Giants pretty much still in this game, only down 7-0 until they tied it at 7-7 to end that first quarter. And Malik Neighbors from that point on really got going in the second quarter with 2 touchdowns just in the second quarter, and that extended the lead to 21-7 in favor of the Giants. And again, still from halftime on, it felt like the game stayed at 21-7 or 21-15 for the longest time. The second half really was a drag, if I'm being honest, because the Giants played decent in the first half, and then they kind of stalled out when the Browns really focused in on taking some things away. But still, they didn't get enough help from their offense. Basically, the Browns, they didn't get enough help from Deshaun, getting the ball to Judy, to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper made some big catches, some very impressive ones, but it just wasn't enough at the end of the day. The Giants' defensive line played a phenomenal game, not just by shutting down Deshaun Watson, sacking him 8 times, but the running game for Cleveland, again, did not look great. And again, we'll harp on this point. When the running game's not there, you become one-dimensional. And Deshaun Watson, playing to the level that he is right now, being one-dimensional is the last thing you want it to be, right? Because you have Deshaun holding the ball for too long, bad decisions. He should have thrown an interception, I think, to Brian Burns, but he just dropped the ball thrown right at him. So it could have ended up a lot worse for Deshaun and the Cleveland offense, but Cleveland's defense did a good job, like I said, of holding the Giants to 0 points in the second half. But again, they just need more offense to kind of help them out a little bit more. And now Cleveland and the Giants both moved to 1-2 on the year. And just my thoughts on the Browns overall, it's through the first 3 games, they've scored 17 points against the Dallas Cowboys. 18 points was enough to get them the win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, based on how we talked about the Jaguars to start this segment, this episode, I think it says more about the Jaguars now, quite frankly, than it does the Browns and how impressive that could have been in that game. And now they put up 15 points on offense yet again. They can't get over scoring 2 touchdowns basically in a field goal or 2. So 2 games now also where they've gone behind in terms of the scoreboard. They've been behind and they've folded. They folded to the pass rush right from opposing teams. The Giants got after them. The Dallas Cowboys got after them, forced Deshaun in a couple of bad decisions, bad throws, leading to interceptions and fumbles and whatnot. The Giants did the exact same thing. And the O-line, to add insult to injury, has been banged up and got even more injured this past Sunday against the Giants, where you had Willis get hurt, Jedrick Wills get hurt. Conklin, another one of their tackles, was inactive for this game, I believe, with a hamstring injury. And, they've just not been healthy from that standpoint, so you can sort of cut them a little bit of slack, but still, when you look at this scenario, when you look at going behind in games and not being able to come back, getting punched in the face and not being able to respond, we've been, or the Dallas Cowboys have been doing the exact same thing in their games, right? Folding when they've gone down into deficits and not being able to come back. Cleveland, if you look at it, hasn't been that much different. They've been almost doing the same exact thing, and we kill the Cowboys over it, I guess mostly because the run defense has been so horrendous. But in terms of just general picture, they're not too far off from what the Cowboys are also doing. So that's something to be worried about a little bit going forward. And in terms of the Giants now, to kind of wrap it up here with this segment, 2 games for the Giants that they've looked better than week 1's just thrashing to the Minnesota Vikings, but it's a short week now. They're going to play the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday, so it is good that it's a short period where you can just continue to ride this momentum, but also it's a short week, so that's not something a lot of people like. But are we ready to kind of say that the Giants should be earning a bit more belief from all of us going forward in some of their games, right? Should we just not go into these games expecting the Giants to lose by 2 touchdowns or 10 points or something like that? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like still in their games against the Commanders and this just game against the Cleveland Browns. It just feels like it's been more of the opposition for some portions of the game than it really has been a dominant performance by the Giants. This upcoming game against the Cowboys should be very interesting because the Giants just ran the ball 32 times and the Cowboys can't stop anybody on planet Earth from running the ball, it seems like. So that'll be fascinating to see. And then I'll get a better answer, a better idea of how confident I can be in the Giants. I'm already seeing a lot of people not giving them any bit of a chance, but you never know. You never know because the Cowboys, I think, have been disappointing me more often than not. In terms of my game picks, I've been going pretty predictable on, the Cowboys, any team that plays the Panthers, just to be surprised by the Panthers looking like a completely different team. Do I think the Giants are incapable of doing that to the Cowboys as well? I don't think it's impossible. So that's why I don't think the Cowboys are just going to win by like 3 touchdowns or something like that. I feel like this could be a close game. It's not going to be great for the Cowboys in that sense, but the Giants, I think, holding off one more week until I fully am ready to say that maybe the Giants have a little bit of life, a little bit of fight in them going forward if they play the way that they did against the Cleveland Browns with that defense playing very, very impressive. It should be something to watch just in a couple of days now on Thursday Night Football, but the Giants get their first win. The Cleveland Browns fall to 1-2, but that's not the last thing we're going to talk about. We have one more segment to get to, and just going over some of the comments that some of the Dallas Cowboys players made, like I mentioned before, about their loss to the Baltimore Ravens this past week, dropping them to 1-2. What have DeMarcus Lawrence said? What has Jordan Lewis said? Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, they all had something to say on it, and we're going to go over it in a couple of seconds.